The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
So before the Commanders were sold last year for just over $6 billion, the Philadelphia Eagles were valued at $4.9 billion. I would imagine they'd go for significantly more than that if they were on the open market today. But 55 years ago today, the team was sold to Leonard Toews for a then record for a franchise, $16.1 million. Now, maybe more than $6 billion, $7 billion, who knows? The NFL is just printing money. Oh, by the way, buckle up. An 18-game schedule is coming. Not this season, but not too far down the road. They just can't avoid it. The cash is just spilling in, and they're not going to give up programming to cut down on that. So, yeah, it's going to happen. Mark Maskey's got a story about it today in the Post. I'll get to that. Also, we'll talk about the Orioles at 10:30. If you hate the Yankees, you got to like what's been happening at Camden Yards last two nights. The Orioles look really good, and with a depleted bullpen, they went into last night's game with their fingers crossed, and they got 7 innings out of Dean Kramer, and the bullpen did the rest. And right now, they are looking really, really good. And you know what? Next week, we got the Battle of the Beltways at Camden Yards. And, last year before, even 2 years before that, wasn't much because, 2 years before was the Orioles bad, but last year the Orioles were good. And the Nats were terrible, and they're not terrible anymore. They didn't win last night. They lost 7-1 at Texas, but that could be some fun. I'm surprised they only had 21,000 last night for the Yankees. I thought that was a little bit low. I think they might tickle that, maybe get above that for the Nationals next week. But, there's a little bit of baseball juice, both in Washington and D.C. as we roll into the month of May. Happy 1st of May to you. It was locker cleanout day for the Capitals yesterday as they were eliminated from the playoffs on Sunday, swept by the Rangers. Gave them, I guess, a day or so to decompress, and then they went in, cleaned out the lockers, and did their usual news conferences. The big takeaway news was the future of T.J. Oshie. It was also revealed that Oshie was playing with a broken hand. This is the life of a hockey player. He broke his hand in Game 3, finished the game, got taped up, shot up, however it was, played in Game 4, and they got swept. But that was the least of his problems, it appears. His back is a major deal. He had back surgery last year, but that was not expected to be a permanent solution, and it wasn't. By his estimation, he had his chiropractor who lives in Minnesota fly in 5 times during the season to fix his back, like he's got some kind of procedure that gets it back in line, and he has less pain for a little while, but it keeps coming back. And here's how bad it is when it's bad. This is Oshie describing exactly what he was going through throughout the season.
Yeah, if I'm in a state where I can't play, I usually can't. I'm usually literally on the floor, peeing in water bottles. So, it's it sucks when it happens, and I can't pick up kids or do any of that until I go see Dr. Johnson out in Minnesota, and he gets me all aligned, and then I seem to feel a lot better.
You heard that right. He lies on the floor and pees in water bottles. So it's difficult for him to even stand up to get to the bathroom, and I guess his family helps to take care of him. He probably can't even lie in bed, has to lie on the floor. That's how bad it is. He wants to play hockey. This is the mentality of great athletes. They want to be out there if there's any chance that can happen. But from the way he described things, and at age 37, I don't know how realistic that is. He does say, though, that it is going to be very, very hard to walk away, and at this point is looking like he wants to play.
I love the game, and still love coming to the rink every day. So, obviously there's some health things that I gotta follow up with Serbs and the doctors and go over some options. But I love the game. I still love coming here, so I still love to play next season. But need to find a way to maybe eliminate me going in and out of the lineup because of the same issue every time. So we'll just be looking for answers for now.
Yeah, you can't count on him. He missed 30 games this year, not all of it because of the back. He missed some because of a concussion. But it's not a sustainable situation unless he finds a solution to it. The GM, Brian McClellan, says they're going to support TJ Oshie, whatever he decides. He said, I thought he played well at the end. To go through what he did physically was impressive to watch. I don't know how long you want to keep doing that, but he'll take some time here and see what is what physically and possible solutions and see how that works out. If the time comes, though, he may be forced to walk away, and maybe there was a little preview of that as his wife and his kids traveled to New York for the first couple of games of the playoffs, just, I guess, maybe to experience that for perhaps the last time. And at 37, if the back issues are what forces him to walk away from hockey, here's how he rationalizes it.
It would be hard for me to ever for sure say that that I'm stepping away from the game. So, I'd love to play next year, but I will need to come back with somewhat of a guarantee that my back won't be. It's hard putting everyone through the situation, from my family at home to the team trying to figure out a lineup to young guys getting called up and going down. So I'd like to find just an answer and a fix to the problem before I make another run at it.
Well, here's the situation is, it's a lot less money, but it's not unlike Steven Strasburg. He's got a year left on his contract. Hockey contracts are guaranteed, and he's due to make $5.75 million next year. You just don't walk away from that. So rather than announce his retirement, this Post story says the more probable outcome is if Oshie decides his back won't allow him to play, is that he'll be placed on long-term injured reserve ahead of next season. That would give Washington cap relief in the amount of his contract, giving Brian McClellan options in filling Oshie's gap in the lineup. So I guess a couple of months to figure things out. Maybe not playing hockey, has another date with the chiropractor. Maybe there's some minor surgery involved, although I guess back surgery is never minor, and you have to keep having it once you start having it. But I guess it's possible by the time next season rolls around that he's ready to go. But, who knows? At age 37 with a team that's in a weird spot, and I talked about this yesterday, they want to get Alex Ovechkin the record. And the way things are shaping up, it seems like it's going to take at least 2 more years. He needs 42 goals to do it. Now, 2 years ago, he did have 42. This past season, got off to the really rough start and managed to finish with 31. Is it possible to do it in one season? Maybe, but it does seem to be a long shot for a player who's now 39 years old. This was Ovi yesterday talking to the media about it and how the season began for him this year.
In January, when you had 8 or 9 goals, like how worried were you about how things were going for you individually, numbers?
Yeah, I was worried I'd get traded, but thanks God, I'm still here. No, to be honest with you, it was tough.
Yeah, a new system, new coach, who I guess he likes now, and whether or not he can have a year at age, will he be 40 next year or 39, whatever it is, will he be able to have a year that he can be at his top level? And then, you get to the question of, if you're not just dragging him along and he does have a big year, maybe you extend him. Guys play hockey a long time. Gordie Howe played his last game at 51. Okay, that's unusual, but we've seen players go into their mid-40s. Can he do that? Well, he's got one backer, at least one, and this is PK Subban, who was a hockey analyst for ESPN on PTI yesterday. Surprising to me, anyway, said this about the immediate future for Ovechkin.
Being recently removed from the game, I can tell you this, you have to be in immense shape to play at this level. And then when it gets to the playoffs, the speed and the physicality ratchets up again. Alex Ovechkin is a generational talent. I mean, when he leaves the game, we're going to miss him tremendously with the tenacity, the explosiveness, and the energy that he brings. But he's going to have to bring that energy and explosiveness next year. Like, he wants to break this record. I believe if he goes into the offseason and gets himself in the best shape that he possibly can at his age, he'll not only break that record next year, he could crush it because he's got Spencer Carberry there, who's going to be up for Coach of the Year. I don't think he could have a better coach to help him do this and also put their team in a position to get to the playoffs. Because remember this, for Alex Ovechkin, it's about winning as well. He wants to win. He wants to compete while he's still playing. So I think it's possible, but he's got to get himself in the best shape. You're skating, playing against guys that are 18, 19, and 20. It's just, that's a part of human nature. He's got to pay attention to those details this offseason, and there's no question that he will. So expect a brand new Alex Ovechkin next season.
Well, he's, I think, been in better shape the last 6 or 7 years than he was in the early part of his career. He was reckless. He was, according to people in the organization, out of shape a lot of times when he came to camp, way too heavy. So he's really concentrated on getting his body in shape. I don't know how much better shape he can get into. When Subban says that he can crush the record, crush 42. 42 would be an unbelievable season for him if he can do it at his age. If he goes way past it, then, again, back to what I said, you got to start thinking about the long term, and maybe you sign him to a contract extension and continue to build around a player who's still at the top of his game. I don't think he is, and I think he realizes that. And, when he was joking about getting traded, he knows he's going to break the record in a Capitals uniform. But, things could change. The outlook could change dramatically if he gets off to a great start next year and is well on track to break Gretzky's record. Then you have a different outlook. But right now, I think you're looking at 2 more years. They find a way to get him the record, and meantime, kind of rebuild around him. That's kind of where they are. I mean, we're seeing the older guys go. Nicholas Backstrom's not going to play again. Maybe TJ Oshie doesn't play again. It's a changing of the guard, which has to happen every year in sports, and particularly in hockey, which is such a rough game. But if Subban is right, then things really ramp up to an interesting level. Let's get to as LeBron turns, because this is always a big soap opera. It's what people obsess about for hours and hours on ESPN and other platforms. What about LeBron? Is he going to stay in Los Angeles? He was asked at the end of his news conference the other night when they were eliminated by Denver, have you played your last game as a Laker? And he said, I'm not going to answer that, and he walked away. So now there's the speculation as to what's going to happen with Bronny, the son who played 1 year at USC. He's in the draft process now, also in the transfer portal. So he could either go back to USC, he could go back to another school in college, he could declare for the draft, and will the Lakers draft Bronny so LeBron and Bronny can play together, and yada, yada, yada. This is what LeBron put out last night after obviously watching a lot of television and listening to a lot of things. He says, I've heard a lot of reports about my future. I said it last night, I'll say it again. I don't know yet, as I'm the only thinking about spending time with my family and friends. When I know after speaking with the family, my counsel, as well as my representation about, then you guys will know. So he didn't really clear anything up there. There's also been a report that playing with Bronny's not a big deal anymore. That and probably in the best interest of Bronny's basketball career, he needs to go back to college. He needs to play some more before he goes to the NBA, because he's not NBA ready. He averaged 6 points a game. And he also, last year, had that horrible incident. Thank God he survived, but he had a heart incident, which he actually died on the court before being revived, has had the surgery. Hopefully everything's going to be okay. But he's certainly in a circumstance where it's probably best that he doesn't face the pressure of going to the NBA and being LeBron's kid. So we'll see where that goes. As to what the Lakers should do, and that would include LeBron, the future, this is what Robert Horry says. He does the color on the radio broadcast for the Lakers. Longtime NBA player, spent some of his career with the Lakers, won a couple of titles there, got 7 championships. He's not Tom Brady, but he's got 7 rings. And this is what he says the Lakers ought to do for next year.
I think you need to run it back. And
with everybody?
With everybody. I know a lot of people are down on D'Lo's. A lot of people are down on all these guys. I think D'Lo learned something this season, that he can be a player in this league if he wants to play defense. And that's the thing. If you watch D'Lo, when he wants to play defense, he can play defense. And I think with this team, if D'Lo gets hot, he had a great season, and LeBron comes back. But the key is, if you bring that core back, you have to make AD the focal point. You have to. LeBron has to take a back seat. AR, all these guys have to take a back seat because tell me what guy in the league can stop AD? Nobody. So you go with that advantage.
Well, look, he had a good year this year.
Mm-hmm.
If you would have said he's going to play 75 games, I would have been like, there is no way. But
I made a bet with some friends of mine that he would play 75 games because I believed him because I looked at his body coming into this season. He looked really good. He had no belly. That's how you can tell if guys worked out. They got a little pooch. They got a little fluffiness. He had no fluffiness coming into the season.
Well, can I get that season again from him? Can LeBron give me that season again? That's what I'm concerned about, Robert, is they had a good year this year.
Yeah.
It's just they ran into the team that they can't get by.
Yeah, they nemesis, but they found a way to contend with that. And so now you're looking like, okay, this is how we beat this team. This is the formula. LeBron, I know you're going to be what 40?
Yeah, but Robert, are the Lakers better than Minnesota?
You know what? I think so. And the reason it is you don't look at records all the time. You look at matchups. And when you look at matchups, you got guys like Rui who has a big body that I'm not going to say he can stop Ant-Man because he's playing amazing, that can stay in front, that can handle that strength, meet force with force. And that's what this is about. Can you meet force with force? And think about it. Every time Lakers play Minnesota, Gobert can't stop AD. Cat can't stop AD. And that's the biggest key. And I think Cat, he's become a three-point shooter, so you don't have to worry about that post-up aspect. So you can put Rui on him. And the matchups are perfect. It's all about matchups.
Yep. What's LeBron do?
I think LeBron, with all the projects he have going out here in LA, I think he's going to use that leverage to get one last big contract. And I know a lot of people are saying, oh, he wants to play with Bronny. He wants to do this. I think with Bronny, I know he's in the portal now, depending on what he's going to, but I think he's going to stay. Because at the end of the day, you look at let's take James Harden, for instance. He set a record the other day making 30 points on 5 different teams. Do you really want that a part of your legacy? Jumping from team to team to team. You think about the greats, Kobe, Dirk, Tim. These guys didn't jump from team to team. They stayed on one team. LeBron has been on 3 teams, and I don't think he wants that to be a part of his legacy.
Okay, but do the Lakers have to draft his son?
No, they don't. At the end of the day, the Lakers are about winning basketball. Now, if you have a slot, and let's be honest, this draft, it ain't the best draft. There's no dominant number 1 player. There's no dominant top 5 players. It could go anyway. Because of the draft is so weak, you draft him. You drafted it because, I watched him play. My son and him play against each other, Sierra Canyon, Harvard Westlake. I've seen him play. The guy is athletic as heck. He can play. He's a great defender. So he could be a project player. I'm not saying he's going to come in the league and set the league on fire, but if he does play, he does leave to go to the NBA. Someone can take a project player because that's what he's going to be. Because he's not ready yet because he still, needs to learn the game like a lot of these guys coming into the draft.
That's Robert Ory with Dan Patrick yesterday on the future of the Lakers and LeBron, where he says he's going to sign another contract. Here's the deal. He's got 1 year left on his contract. It's $51.4 million for next season, but he can opt out of that. If he does, he would be eligible for a 2-year extension, which would pay him an additional $112 million from 2025 to 2027. So in other words, he would get the $51 million for next year, another $112. So he'd be signing up for like another $160-some million to play 3 more years. Will he be able to play 3 more years? Who knows? But that's part of the picture. As far as staying with the Lakers, I tend to believe that's what he wants to do. I don't know if it's worried about jumping from team to team to team because he's done that. He's made that famous with the decision to go to Miami. Then he jumped back to Cleveland, took care of unfinished business, delivered a title there, and then went out to Los Angeles where he's got a lot of business interests, including the movies. And he probably wants to stay close to that, not that he can't hop on a private plane and go from place to place. What Tony said yesterday on PTI, I don't necessarily buy it, but it's another thought on this, that he wants to be the first player to win championships with 4 different teams. So he wouldn't be a ride-along, but he might be able to identify a team that he thinks is capable of winning with him and jump on the way Kevin Durant did with the Golden State Warriors for a couple of years and win another title and then make it 4 cities and 4 different championships. I don't know. But whatever. He's in a good spot, and who knew that at age 39 he'd still be this good and still be in this much demand, and in many ways still controlling the NBA. You know, a lot of stuff still revolves around LeBron James. Incredible. All right, coming up, a little football stuff. Mark Maskey's story on the expected move to 18 games in the NFL. And Tony and Mike also weigh in on the crazy Michael Penix draft choice by the Atlanta Falcons and what's behind that. I think they're somewhat related, and I'll tell you why as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Things pretty good in Birdland these days, huh? Orioles back in first place, playing very well. No matter what happens in the last 2 games of this series with the Yankees, that's 101 consecutive regular season series without being swept. And if they win tonight, that's another series victory. They would go 2 games up on the Yankees, and there's no way New York leaves town without the Orioles holding on to first place. And, it's looking like a good year once again for them. And some thought, they'll take a step back because they overachieved last year. Doesn't look that way. Gunnar Henderson, American League Rookie of the Year, picked up right where he left off. They're getting absolutely great pitching performances. Corbin Burns has been lights out, and he goes tonight. It looks good. It looks really good. We'll do Orioles preview coming up at 10:30 with lots of thoughts from Brandon Hyde and Dean Kramer. Plus, Mike Elias, the general manager, was on High Heat with Chris Russo yesterday, and we'll play some of that conversation as well, as he has done a spectacular job. He was the executive of the year in Major League Baseball last year, and I guess there was really nobody who would even be considered to be another choice for that as he won the award. So some football stuff here. And this is, I guess, not earth-shattering news because most of us have felt this way for a while, that when the new collective bargaining agreement was reached, which runs out in 2030, though I think they have an opener in it, the owners do, in the year or two, because they're going to get even more television money out of the deal. They managed to continue to turn on the gusher of money because, they sell playoff games to Amazon and Peacock. They're going to do more of that. They basically said whatever we used to agree to in the past, that we would protect other people, that's gone. Used to be that they weren't going to play games on Friday night because they didn't want to hurt the high school product. No. We're playing a game in Brazil this year on Friday night. Oh, Christmas Day falls on a Wednesday? That's an awkward time to have NFL games. No, we're going to take that. NBA, oh, yeah, you thought Christmas Day was your day? No. It's ours. We played games last year on Monday. We'll play them on Wednesday. We'll play them on Saturday. We don't care. We like people home watching television and bringing more and more money to us. And the more games you have, the more money you bring in. Now, they have a 17-game regular season and a 3-game exhibition season. Theoretically, they're giving you 20 games. The owners say, well, we just want to reorganize things a little bit, so we're going to have 2 preseason games and 18 regular season games. It's going that way. Roger Goodell said that's what he wants, and that's meaning that's what the owners want because he works for the owners, and he said it to Pat McAfee last week during the draft. And Mark Maskey's story today, the lead is NFL team owners largely support Commissioner Roger Goodell's preference for an 18-game regular season, and the league and owners might make a renewed attempt to get the players' union to agree to such lengthening of the season well before the collective bargaining agreement expires after the 2030 season, according to 5 familiar with the NFL inner workings and the owners' views. Here's how the renewed attempt is going to go. It's the same way as Sonny Corleone handled the cameraman outside his sister's wedding at the compound when the Godfather wedding scene goes on, and he doesn't want the photographers there, so he takes the cameras and he smashes them on the ground and throws down a couple of 20s. That's how they handle this. They say to the players, yeah, I know you don't want extra games, but here's another $1 billion. Shut up. And the players are going to take it, and they have. Remember, we'll never, ever accept an 17-game schedule. Well, they now have a 17-game schedule. And I've heard about this for years. We used to have Larry Weissman on our show. Larry Weissman covered the NFL for USA Today probably 25 years. And he would come on the show and he'd say, here's where it's going. They're going to have the Super Bowl on President's Weekend so that you have a day off after the Super Bowl. So that means only moving it up a week. They're also talking about the possibility of 2 byes. They did that once. I don't think it was that bad. It was 1993. Now, at that time, they started the season Labor Day weekend. They don't do that anymore because of television. They find that they don't get the ratings that they want in the opening weekend while people are, wrapping up their vacations and taking care of last-minute school stuff and things like that. So this would stretch it out, and, it doesn't matter when they play. People are going to watch. If they start playing the Super Bowl at some point in March, you're not going to say, well, it's March, I can't watch football. Of course you're going to watch it. That's the way that's going to go. So, you're looking at a calendar as they continue to eat up months of the year. The only month they don't really own right now is July. But you would have now the NFL Combine in March. You'd start free agency in April, and you'd have the draft in May. We wouldn't have even had the draft yet if we had an 18-game schedule, and that's what is going to happen. You can pretty much count on that, I believe. Now, this is what Maskey writes. He says, the owner's previous negotiations with the players on an 18-game season came with a different set of union leaders. Player representatives voted in June to elect Lloyd Howell to succeed DeMaurice Smith as the union's executive director. Players voted in March to elect Detroit Lions linebacker Jalen Reeves-Maybin to succeed J.C. Treader, a former center for the Packers and Browns, as the president of the Players Association. Doesn't matter who's running the show here. They just say, shut up, here's money, go away. And, players know their careers are short, and that's why they're not going to fight it that much. If there's more money in it for them for the number of years they play, so be it. And, yeah, we'll see quarterbacks go for a while, and Aaron Rodgers at 40, may stay for a while with the Jets, may play 2-3 more years. Who knows? Tom Brady at age 40, what is he going to be, 47? No, he'll be 40. He'll be 46 in August. And no. Yeah, he'll be 47. Excuse me, 47. He'll be 47 in August. He's not. I don't think he's totally kidding about coming back. I think that's on his mind. He sat out for a season, probably didn't like it, wants to get back in. So I could see this happening. Meantime, we got the big flap about what the Atlanta Falcons did, and it does seem bizarre. They gave Kirk Cousins a $180 million contract, and then they spent the number 8 pick of the draft on Michael Penix Jr., the quarterback from Washington, who was expected to be a high pick, not necessarily even in the first round, but he went number 8. And people are going, what are you doing? What are you doing here? I think this ties in to what I've just been talking about here, that the realization is with an 18-game schedule, your star quarterback may get to the finish line. He may not. It ended after 4 plays for Aaron Rodgers this past year, and people looked at the Jets and said, oh, man, what are you doing there? You got a chance to win. Why are you going with Zach Wilson? You could have had a veteran quarterback in there, and maybe you would have been able to compete for the playoffs. And had you made it to the playoffs because of the miraculous recovery by Aaron Rodgers, where he was in the cone of darkness for 4 days or whatever it was, maybe he even plays in the playoffs. You didn't get there, and you didn't have really a good backup plan. So could it be that the Atlanta Falcons are looking at Kirk Cousins, who's coming off a torn Achilles? He'd remained remarkably healthy prior to that. I don't think he'd ever missed a game because of injury after coming in the league in 2012. He did miss a game or two because of COVID, but no, he had not missed a game because of injury, and now he misses the second half of the season with a torn Achilles. And at age 34, 35, can he stay healthy for a full year? If he can't, maybe you've developed a quarterback behind him who can take you over the finish line. As, you go way back to Jeff Hostetler in the 80s when Phil Simms got hurt. He won a Super Bowl as a backup quarterback. We've had other situations where quarterbacks have made major fill-ins going back to the Dolphins' undefeated season, where the bulk of the season was played by Earl Morrall, as Bob Greasy had a broken ankle, which he recovered from and made it back to the playoffs and won the Super Bowl. So I think there might be something to this, that if there is another injury to Kirk Cousins and the team is good and Michael Penix takes them to the playoffs and they look good and they look like a threat in the playoffs, maybe they don't look as foolish as they do right now. Right now, they're taking it on the chin. This was Tony and Mike yesterday and what the Falcons did on PTI.
Charles Robinson of Yahoo reports that team owner Arthur Blank signed off on the draft pick because Penix was the team's number 2 rated quarterback in the whole draft behind Caleb Williams, and that next year's quarterback class looks weaker, and that Blank wants to overlap Cousins with a special talent who's waiting in the wings and ready to go after Cousins. Tony, does all that make more sense to you now?
No, they're convenient rationalizations to me. They're like, justification talking points when people criticize this. I think it's a combustible situation. I think it might be an absurd situation. I think of Trey Lance when he went to San Francisco and how that blew up. Look, the case is made on the Packers that the Packers drafted Rodgers when they already had Favre, that they drafted Love when they already had Rodgers. And then people say, oh, look at Kansas City. They drafted Mahomes when they already had Alex Smith. And the flaw in that logic is simple, Mike. Neither the Packers nor the Chiefs went out on the free agent market and spent $180 million to bring in a quarterback right then and there. And that's what the Falcons did. That's what they did. So I
Tony,
find it a dicey situation.
Well, those guys were toward the end of their careers. And I know that Cousins, who they just signed, he's in his mid-30s. What is Cousins, like 35, maybe even 36? But, Tony, Penix is 24 years old. He is not like a 21-year-old. That's 24. So by the time he starts, if Atlanta's scouting and instincts are any good, it's going to be 2 years at least of Cousins. That means Penix will be 26. First of all, you have things you didn't have going back to Rodgers and Favre in that transition. You have social media. You have the examination of locker rooms. You have impatient owners and teams and GMs and coaches who want people to play today. And if you go 1-2 and you're Kirk Cousins, they'll be demanding Penix. There'll be a split locker room who'll be making their feelings known on Instagram. There's all of that.
I don't understand why do you want to torment Cousins by saying you picked his successor in this draft? Why did you do that? You're going to give him the $100 million guaranteed and send him out there in a year? Just get rid of him?
It could happen. I mean, I don't know what the structure of the contract is because Cousins usually gets a deal that's guaranteed. But again, I keep going back to this move towards 18 games. It won't be next year. It may not be the year after that, but it's coming. And you're going to have depth at the quarterback position, which is hard to find. I mean, what they've done in Atlanta is they've taken one of those guys. Okay, Kirk Cousins isn't on the top tier that's headed up by Patrick Mahomes, but he's on the second tier. He's good enough to get you to the playoffs, and what happens from there, we'll see. If you add another quarterback who's on his way to getting to that level, then you got a succession plan in place, and you have the ability, if Cousins gets hurt, to put somebody in who you feel confident in and can win. And Taylor Heineke, as a backup last year, was not the answer for them. So Heineke will be the third quarterback. He'll be the veteran guy on this team. They may keep him on the practice squad, whatever it is. And you're going to have the young, developing, maybe future superstar with a guy who's damn good right now. I don't know if that's the worst situation to be in. It does seem very, very awkward. No question about it. And it's different than other teams have done. But I'll tell you something. It's a copycat league. If it works, you're going to see other teams trying to do it. And you're trying to fill the most difficult position in sports to fill, which is starting quarterback. And if you have two guys who are capable of being really, really good or even great, it's not the worst situation to be in. Coming up, Leonard Toews bought the Philadelphia Eagles 55 years ago today. They are now worth over $4 billion, maybe over 6 or 7, who knows. The selling price was $16 million, and had Leonard Toews not had a major problem with gambling, who knows what his family would be sitting on right now. We'll look at the sad story of Toews and what transpired with the Eagles as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Tony's coming up at 11 o'clock. I'm not breaking any news here, but owning an NFL team, it's a hell of an investment. The money is just gushing right now. And I don't know what can change it. I don't see anything on the horizon that could stand in their way. People love football. They love to watch it on TV. It's a great marriage. It's moving into the streaming era as we got more and more games on Amazon Prime and Peacock and so forth. And the network deals are unbelievable. The league has the ability to reopen the collective bargaining agreement and make even more money, or I should say the television contracts. I think the television contracts have another 10 years to go, but I think in like 5 years they can reopen and get even more money, which they will. It's just insane. But I always laugh at what franchises used to sell for. And very famously, Jerry Jones mortgaged everything he had to buy the Dallas Cowboys in 1989 for, I think it was $189 million. And among those who said he was an absolute fool for doing it was one Donald Trump, businessman Donald Trump. Obviously, he was not a fool. He's got a franchise that if you put it up for sale today, probably would top $10 billion. It probably would. 55 years ago today, the NFL was on solid footing. They had merged with the AFL because that war was going to be difficult to sustain. They were both, kind of driving each other out of business with what they were spending. So there was some cost certainty there. You had the network television contract, which wasn't anywhere near what it is now. But, paying what Leonard Toews paid to buy the Philadelphia Eagles from Jerry Wallman, D.C. guy who went bankrupt, what he paid to buy the Philadelphia Eagles in 1969 on this day was a record price for a franchise in any sport, $16.1 million. $16.1 million. Last year, before the Commanders were sold, the Eagles were valued at $4.9 billion. And Leonard Toews might have been able to, I don't know if he wouldn't be still alive. He died in 2003. But his family would be sitting pretty now with a $16 million investment in 1969. But there was a fatal flaw in Leonard Toews, and it's an unbelievable story if you never heard it. He did some really good things at the beginning, including hiring Dick Vermeil as his coach in 1976. And in 1980, they went to the Super Bowl, lost to the Raiders, and Philadelphia went nuts. It's a football town. They love the Eagles, and he was riding high in terms of popularity. People loved Leonard Toews, and he was a very generous man, but he had a big problem, gambling, and he would go to Atlantic City in a limousine just about every night to gamble. And this is part of his story as told on NFL Films about the downfall of Leonard Toews.
Could you describe what you would do on a night if you went to Atlantic City? Describe that scene.
Oh, yeah. I'd bet $10,000 on each number, which is $70,000.
You would play all the different hands?
Yeah, seven hands, $10,000 a hand.
What's the biggest that you lost in one night?
Oh, something over $1 million, I guess,
He could lose $1 million and would stand up and say, "Thank you very much," and walk away.
Do you think that there's a certain machismo about losing that amount of money, that you could lose that amount of money and just sort of, I don't give a damn, and shrug it off?
Actually, when I went home, I never knew how much I lost.
Why
I
not?
would find out the next day because I didn't keep track of it. How the hell would I keep track of it? Drinking and gambling? I don't know how many markers I signed. No.
I was there, and I remember at the Sands, this pit boss called the president of the Sands at like 2:30 in the morning when he was drunk to extend his line of credit another $300,000 or $400,000. That to me was unconscionable. Why they would do that and take the man's money. Wasn't put a gun to his head. I was just sick at seeing this fortune being thrown away on the roll of a card. You wouldn't leave. Just wouldn't leave.
What happened when you were losing and your friends would come up to you and they'd say, "Leonard, stop this. This is self-destructive." What would you do?
So I get lost. I wouldn't pay any attention to them.
A couple times I tried to get him to stop gambling, and his answer to me was, "What's the matter? Are you afraid there's not going to be enough left for you?"
I used to say to him, let's do something else. Why don't we go to a movie or something? He says, because they don't have chips in a movie.
People are trying to help. You got to do what you want to do. I think the best thing you can say about it is stupidity. That's what it is. You know, how do you analyze? I guess I was one of those compulsive gamblers, and it didn't mix with the scotch.
We finally called Dr. Custard. Dr. Custard was the one, by the way, who established compulsive gambling as a disease.
Dr. Custer came to me and said, I met Leonard in a bar, and he had a scotch in one hand, a cigarette in the other, and he said, what are you here for? And he said, I'm here to help you with your compulsive gambling. And Leonard said, hell, I beat smoking and drinking. What makes you think I can't beat gambling?
When Dr. Custer came to see you, what did you think about that?
Paying attention to him. No.
Yeah, it was really sad. His home was repossessed, and he was basically homeless. And it was Dick Vermeil who paid for him to live in a hotel for the rest of his life. He estimated he'd lost $40 to $50 million gambling, and was forced to sell. He sold the team in April of 1985 to Norman Bremen. And now you look at the price differential. He bought for $16.1 million and sold for $65 million, but all those gains were eaten up in gambling losses and other debts that he had run up, and he had nothing at the end. And he said, yes, Dick Vermeil paid for me, but he never asked. He just did it. So he's very prideful about that. He didn't want people to help him. In fact, they were talking about having a benefit for him, and he said, don't do that. Don't do that. Now, he did a lot of charitable things, and he was very, very generous with people. They said when he would show up in Atlantic City to gamble, he would have a duffel bag full of $100 bills, and he'd hand them out left and right. The guy that helped him out of his limousine, the person that showed him to his blackjack table, all that stuff. And yet, he just couldn't help himself with the gambling, and as he would gamble throughout the night, he continued to drink. And the drinking would get worse, and he would become more and more intoxicated, and he would bet more money, and he would lose more money. I mean, it was just really incredible what happened to him. And now the Philadelphia Eagles are owned by Jeffrey Lurie, who Norman Bremen sold to in 9 years later, I guess 1994, for $185 million, and he's sitting on a team that's worth probably well over $6 billion at this point, and it's just unbelievable. But that was what gambling did to Leonard Toews, and his story, I think, is instructive for a lot of people. He made a lot of money in the trucking business, very successful businessman, very well respected in the Philadelphia area, but at the end, he lost it all. And in his obituary, they said Leonard Toews lived life like a football game. He threw on every down. Some more financial trouble. Bill Romanowski. Remember Romo played in the NFL for a long time when he played 16 years with the Broncos and the 49ers. He won 4 Super Bowl rings, had more than 1,000 tackles, and was open later on about using steroids during his career, wasn't tested for it. Bad guy on the field, spit at other players. Allegedly, there were some racial slurs that he put out, and he was not a well-liked player. After he finished playing, he and his wife started a nutrition business. And now the chickens have come home to roost because the government says they owe $15 million in back taxes, didn't pay back taxes for that. They are also facing a civil suit in the Department of Justice that was brought against them last summer. So to delay that, they declared bankruptcy, which will give them a temporary reprieve, which will trigger an automatic pause in the Department of Justice's efforts to collect on the money that they are owed. The Department of Justice alleges that after he retired, which was at the end of the 2003 season, Romanowski and his wife failed to pay millions in income tax. In attempts to avoid reporting federal income and repaying those taxes, the couple then used the money from Nutrition 53, remember he wore 53, the supplement the company they founded to pay for personal expenses and those of their 2 children. According to court records, Bill and Julie Romanowski opened up bank accounts on behalf of Nutrition 53, but but then used the money in those accounts to pay for everything for their rent on their 6,000-square-foot home in California, to groceries, veterinarian expenses, and over 170 visits to nail salons, hair salons, and day spas. So they were living pretty good on those tax dollars. Nutrition 53 was also named as a defendant in a federal suit filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy last fall. Department of Justice lawyers have since filed a motion for default judgment against the Romanowskis, asking a judge to immediately rule in the government's favor. A hearing on that motion is scheduled, I guess, for next week. This is something that happens post-football, that they like the action of it. This was a very good documentary that was done, I don't know, it could be 10 years ago, maybe more. It's called Broke on ESPN. I think it was ESPN, one of those 30 for 30s. And what they say is they go to these players, and, Romanowski, okay, he didn't make what they make now, but 20 years ago, he was making very good money. He was an all-pro type of player. And they say to him, hey, take your money, put it in here, put it in an annuity where it will grow and provide revenue for you. And nope, they like the action. They want to be involved in something which can score big. And, one of the sadder stories around here is Clinton Portis. Clinton Portis blew through most of his $40 million that he made playing by making foolish investments, talked into things by people, he invested in I think it was a strip club that lost like $8 million. I mean, people just took him to the cleaners. And what happens with these players is they're offered opportunities to make good use of their money, and some of them do. Some of them have most of what they made playing. They get into business, they get into some other career, and they live very comfortably, and they pass along a lot of money to their heirs and things like that. But a lot of them don't, and a lot of them just want the action of this. And I've probably told this before, but Brian Mitchell, when he was the player rep for the Redskins, and Brian's a really smart guy. I think I've heard him say he hasn't touched any of the money he made playing football. He's done well in broadcasting and other things that he's done. He said the league had a setup where if you put in $10,000, or maybe it was even more, maybe it was like $20,000, they would match it. So let's say you played 5 years and you put in $100,000, you'd have $200,000 when you retired. You can't get money like that in a 5-year span and anything else. And the players would come to him about that, and they would say, no, they're not going to take my money. So, it's a very, very dicey situation for players. And, you look at the money that they make now, and you say, well, how can you possibly go broke on that? You can. When players, and really smart players, would do this. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar got taken by a bad investment guy, and that's part of the reason he played until he was 42 years old. And here's Romo thinking he's going to dance around taxes by setting up these phony baloney bank accounts, and eventually it comes home. And now there's $15.5 million due in back taxes. Could they reach a settlement? Maybe they could. But, that's kind of the way the world turns. All right, next hour, we're going to take a further look at the Caps. Spencer Carberry, locker cleanout day, with some interesting things to say, what he says about the fan base as well. And, of course, we do Orioles preview every Wednesday. Lots to discuss with the way the team is playing, plus what Mike Elias said on High Heat with Chris Russo yesterday. That and more. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. How did we get to the 1st of May so quickly? Whew, time is flying. Some things to talk about this hour. Yeah, it's slowed down a little bit. Capitals are out of the playoffs. We're through with the draft. But baseball's getting interesting. Orioles playing really well. They won back-to-back games against the Yankees, moved back into first place. We'll do Orioles preview at 10:30 with some explanation on why things are working so well for them right now. Nats are playing decently. Yeah, they lost last night at Texas. But some excitement for a little Battle of the Beltways next week at Camden Yards, right? That should be more interesting than it's been in recent years. And also the Capitals and what might be in the future for Alex Ovechkin and TJ Oshie, who said yesterday that his back is so bad that it's unlikely. Well, he didn't say unlikely. He said he's got to make some choices, but it's at the point where he just can't be counted on. He doesn't know when the back is going to flare up. He's got a chiropractor that he uses from Minnesota, and he flies him in or he goes to see him, and it's just not sustainable. They can't count on him, and he went so far as to say his back was so bad that even with the broken hand that he had in the last 2 games of the playoffs, hockey players never reveal injuries unless it's serious, and then it's upper body or lower body. But he was playing with a broken hand the last 2 games of the series. He said, that's like a hangnail compared to my back trouble, and says when it gets really bad, he has to lie on the floor at home and pee into a bottle. He can't even get up to go to the bathroom. So that's not a good situation. Caps GM Brian McClellan says he's going to give him time to figure things out. They have time. He's going to go see his various doctors and see what they can do. But his future would be very much in doubt. With or without Oshie, though, there's got to be some additions to the team. They know that. And as part of yesterday's media sessions with the players clearing out for the summer, Coach Spencer Carberry addressing what's going to be needed in the offseason.
Probably when you start to break down the individual player, what attributes do we need to add? Size on the back end, I think about speed is right up there. And you can tell, what sticks out is Lappy, right? Lappy's foot speed jumps off the page when you're standing there on the bench, and as I'm sure it jumps out to our fans and people watching, is his foot speed makes a difference. And so when you have one of those guys, but we need more of that inside of our lineup, no question.
Lappy is Hendrix Lapierre. Everybody's got a nickname in hockey, so there's no way he was going to be called Hendrix or Lapierre. He's Lappy. As far as his first season in Washington, and you got to give him credit for this because the team looked like it was going to go nowhere. With 3 weeks to go in the season, they looked dead. He got them in. They weren't as competitive as you would hope in the playoffs, but they got there. And he's a young guy who, unlike we've had in the past where you get like 3-year spurts from various coaches, he's a guy who's hoping to stay a while and really has been greeted well, he says, by the fan base.
Coaching in Washington and the fan base and the Rock the Red and the enthusiasm around town and people coming up to me, whether it's in Virginia or downtown D.C. or in Maryland where my son plays, you genuinely can feel this is a hockey town and people love the Washington Capitals. And I felt that in the community. And then you get into Capital One Arena and feel that on the bench. That was really special to be able to go through, especially some games where we really got rocking in there and it was tight and it was going to overtime. And I'll remember that and hopefully get to experience that for a lot of years to come.
You got to keep winning. I think there is a very, very loyal fan base here. It's a very solid fan base, and they packed that building wearing red jerseys. That's a really cool thing. Hockey, to me, I know some people get angry about this, but to me, it's still a niche sport. It's got a very loyal following. People watch it, but it's hockey. I mean, we benefit from a number of things here with the Capitals. They've been a pretty consistent winner. Really, over 40 years. Ever since they made the trade for Rod Langway, there's been a few down periods. But by and large, they've been a team that's been competitive in the playoffs most years, competing for Stanley Cups. They don't often get deep in the playoffs. They've only made it to the Eastern Conference Finals 3 times, and they've won 1 cup since they came into the league in 1974. Yeah, so we're coming up now in 50 years of this actually was the 50th season, right? I think it was, 50th season for Capitals hockey. So they benefit from that. And also having an identifiable star in Alex Ovechkin, that means a lot. But if the football team gets really good again, I know that's hard to imagine with what we've seen for the last 25 years, but if they get good again, it's not really a hockey town. It is a town that likes its hockey team, and they like it because they win. We got another year where not only the Wizards didn't make the postseason, they were god-awful. They were the second worst team in the league. The Nationals, maybe some promise this year, but we never really had the afterglow of the World Series. They won the World Series in 2019. You had the pandemic the following year. Fans couldn't go to the ballpark, and the team went downhill quickly. They're on their way back up, but they may be a year or 2 away from being a team that gets into the postseason. Well, once you get into the postseason, it's a crapshoot. You never know what's going to happen. But Yeah, good for Spencer Carberry for feeling the love. I think he's benefiting from the fact that most of the other teams around here stink, and that includes college basketball. This is an unusual pro town. In big cities, it's not usually like this, but it works this way in Washington, not with college football. Maryland's had some decent teams over the years. I think even if they had a team that was contending to be in the playoff, I don't think it would create the excitement that it would with Maryland basketball. And when Georgetown's been good, that's been a big thing. Well, they had bad years. Neither one of those teams made the tournament. Georgetown was particularly bad this year, so that hurt. So the Capitals are right now the team that you can look at and go, oh, they're pretty good, and at least they're in the postseason, which may turn out to be the only team that makes the postseason in this calendar year. I'm not talking about hockey, or I'm not talking about soccer or the UFL. Now we had a football team that made it last year. These are minor sports. So yeah, I think he's going to say that. And on top of everything else, notice that he said Washington, because that's an important part of this whole thing. This at this point, if things had progressed the way Ted wanted them to, we'd still be talking about this team moving to Virginia in 2027. Yeah. So Ted made the deal because he got clobbered in Virginia. He and his governor buddy didn't take into account that they were not going to get through the Senate on this, and so now he's back and they're talking up Washington. But it was interesting to hear Carberry say, in fact, Washington, because that's where they're staying right now, and in my mind, that's a good thing. I don't know how closely you followed what's going on with the NCAA, which is basically dead. I mean, it has no power. It doesn't do much of anything. And they're being sued. They're being sued because of the way that they've handled the NIL, that they haven't allowed schools to pay athletes directly. Virginia has passed a law and said that their schools can do it. And they anticipate the NCAA losing in court. But they're facing a $4 to $5 billion suit from former players and current players who say, yeah, we were due money before, we didn't get it, and we you're illegally handling the way that the NIL works right now. So they're in scramble mode now to make a settlement with them, the NCAA is, so they can avoid paying this $4 to $5 billion payout. And what it's going to lead to is it's going to lead to players getting paid. It's what has to happen. There has to be contracts for the players. You can have buyouts in them, but this collective thing that they have now, and there's really no real system for paying the players and how much they get and their ability to jump from school to school whenever they want to with the transfer portal just for more money in some cases. They got to get their arms around this. So this was yesterday. It was the Rich Eisen show, and he was not doing the show yesterday. He had a fill-in for him, but this was a reporter for ESPN, and he's done a deep dive into this and what the NCAA is facing. And Tom Pelissero, sitting in for Rich, talked to him about if, in fact, there is an agreement made where the players start to get paid and there is no more of this collective nonsense and you actually have a system of salaried players, what's that going to mean for the competitive balance and how we watch sports?
The upshot of it all is that there has been a huge shift in momentum in the past year, but really even in the past few weeks, where college sports leaders have sort of come to the acceptance that they're going to have to, or would behoove them to share revenue with, at least at the top end of college football, their athletes moving forward through some kind of collective bargaining agreement. And right now, the catalyst or the vehicle that might help at least get the first framework of what that agreement might look like, all this usually happens through a players union in pro sports. Colleges don't have a players association like that set up yet. So the first framework for what a revenue share agreement might look like would likely happen as part of a settlement for this antitrust lawsuit that's been going on for a couple of years. And the two sides in that case are getting pretty into the weeds on a discussion of what that framework would look like moving forward.
So for college athletes right now, college athletes in the future, we know that NIL has gone from being the Wild West to basically still the Wild West, and they're trying to put guidelines in place, but the guidelines aren't necessarily real stringent. There's different schools that are competing very much financially, especially in the transfer portal for college football players right now. If this goes through, how, if at all, does that potentially allow the NCAA or other governing bodies to rein in some of the craziness that's led to what we've seen over the past several years?
The kind of things we see in collective bargaining agreements for pro sports lay out the ability for them to sign contracts that have a player staying somewhere longer than a year. Right now, college sports, with the way the transfer portal and NIL is set up, at least once a year, sometimes twice a year, players have an opportunity to basically be unrestricted free agents. And I think a lot of coaches and athletic administrators have realized that's not a great idea. But in order for them to get a little bit of control back over that part of the game, and there are lawsuits preventing them from making rules that prohibit that right now. They're going to have to give up something else in order to get that control back. And that something else is almost certainly going to be a piece of all of the TV money that has been pouring into college sports over the past couple of decades.
How much is this also about the NCAA just fighting for survival as an organization in terms of, we know that there have been proposals on could you have the big schools all band together and basically break off and form a completely different league. For the NCAA to even be relevant, to exist in 5 years, how important is it for them to resolve some of these things from a legal perspective and at least have a path forward that they remain the governing body here?
So the House case, if it goes to trial, and it's scheduled to go to trial next January, could cost the NCAA somewhere between $4 and $5 billion in damages if they lose. And it's a pretty good bet they're going to lose. Their track record in these cases in recent years has been pretty rough. So I think that's one of the big motivations behind negotiating it. So it is an existential threat for the NCAA. And I think we still may see a model in the future where the top 20, 30, 40 schools, whatever it may be, split off and do their own thing. But the NCAA for the past 30 years or so has been a after-school extracurricular activity when it's convenient for them to think of themselves that way, and a huge multi-billion-dollar entertainment business when they want to think about themselves that way. We've reached a point where they're going to have to pick one of those two lanes. And we may see some schools decide they want to take a step back and operate more like a D2 or D3 school, but we're definitely going to see a group of schools say jump with both feet into the sort of this is a billion-dollar entertainment industry, and we're going to start treating it like one.
The amazing part, and I'm not intending to put words in your mouth here, Dan. We appreciate you being here. Dan Murphy, staff writer for ESPN.com. Basically, what I hear is this is illegal, what the NCAA is doing. It's always been illegal. We've been complicit in this for decades of letting them do the illegal things because we like football, because we like March Madness, we like those types of things. In your mind, if this model moves forward here, does the fabric of the sport change? Does it even potentially change for the better in terms of some of the things with NIL and unlimited transfers and those types of things? Is this an improvement for the average fan, or is this going to work to the detriment? We're going to go completely, down a different path here moving forward.
So the law is not quite black and white, and that's why I think it's tough to say that it's been illegal for the past 30 years. Really, the Supreme Court and judges have changed their mind about how they interpret this murky part of the law that for a while gave the NCAA basically a special exception to violate some of the rules that no other industry in the country can violate. That special exception is now gone, which is why we've had this turmoil over the last 3 to 4 years. In terms of what this means for fans, if you are a fan that really wants to make sure that he sees Alabama play Jacksonville State because they live in the same state, or wants to make sure that Ohio State is going to play Akron every once in a while and likes those stories, that might not happen in the future. But if you're a fan who wants to see Ohio State play Oregon every week or Alabama play Texas, we're going to see more and more of those matchups coming because I think what this is leading to is a bigger separation between the 30 or 40 schools that are just playing in a different stratosphere than everybody else with money right now.
And sign me up for that. I'd rather see that. Yeah, Appalachian State, every generation beats Michigan. We have these upsets that happen. They don't happen that frequently. And most of the time, these are lopsided scores where everybody on the team gets a chance to play. It's more money for the school. They get guarantees for the smaller schools to go play there. But yeah, you want to see the big boys play the big boys every week. It's okay with me. That would be one of the good things that would come out of this. That, by the way, is Dan Murphy, who is a reporter for ESPN, who's looking at what's coming down the pike for the NCAA, and it's a speeding train. They're going to lose. They're going to lose this suit, and it's $4 to $5 billion. So what they're trying to work on now is a structure, which people like Jay Billis have been talking about for years and years and years, where the players actually get paid a salary. This is a multi-billion-dollar business. The coaches are getting mega rich. Finally, the players are getting something, but they need a structure in place. And this chaos, which I'm sure has driven out some really good coaches, including Nick Saban, who his wife said to him, "What are we still doing this for? Every time a recruit comes to you, he wants to know how much he's going to be paid. This isn't what we signed up for." And this way, there'll be an actual salary cap. Player can negotiate where he wants to go. If there's money for him there, he goes and plays there. If not, he goes someplace else. The transfer portal, yeah, you can move, but now you're going to have to buy your way out. There'll be a buyout. They'll have to sign these guys to contracts. Things are going to make sense. And this is what is going to have to happen, or the NCAA and the college football structure that we have now, and even basketball to a smaller extent, isn't going to make it. It's not going to work. It just is not going to happen this way. And what it means for the long term sounds like is a good thing for me anyway. That when we first heard about the NIL and the transfer portal, a lot of people said, "Oh God, this is not going to make any sense. Guys are just going to all go play for the same team, and there's not going to be any competitive balance." No, we saw some great games, and Alabama didn't win this year, and Michigan did. So it has been, I think, a plus, and once they get a structure in place, it'll be even better. Some new information on this crazy Shohei Ohtani story where his interpreter, Ippei Mizuhara, reportedly took $16 million from him, and there were these series of $500,000 payouts that were made to an illegal bookmaker. There's some more reporting from ESPN which says this is how they made it happen. They actually forwarded the big payments, the $500,000 payments, to California and Las Vegas casinos. The money was deposited in gambling accounts, converted into chips, and later cashed out to pay the bookie. Wow. So this is kind of an elaborate thing. Now, it looks like Ohtani is completely off the hook for this. The center of the investigation, and this is how they found out that the interpreter was involved in this, his name is Matthew Boyer. You've heard his name, the California bookmaker who took all the bets. He's what they call a whale. He bets big. He lost $7.9 million at Resorts World from June of 2022 to October of 2023, just over a year. So, that's some serious betting. Multiple sources told ESPN that Boyer, who has worked as a commodity broker and owns a jiu-jitsu studio, got into the bookmaking business more than 20 years ago. It became his primary source of income soon after the 2008 financial crisis, when he befriended bookmaker Owen Hansen, former USC football player, convicted of running an international drug trafficking, gambling, and money laundering operation. Hansen went to federal prison on a 21-year sentence in 2017, but had his sentence reduced and was released in March. Look, this guy, Mizuhara, if he was acting on his own, he got involved in some bad business with some bad people. And how this doesn't touch Ohtani, I know they've investigated it. It just seems very odd to me, just to me. One other thing before we get to Orioles preview, and I saw this online a couple days ago. I meant to mention it's in the actual paper today. Scott Allen did a good job with this, looking at the quarterbacks who have been drafted in the first round by Washington over the years. He went all the way back to Sammy Baugh in 1937, which was a hell of a pick. That was a great pick when he was drafted 6th overall, and he won 2 championships. And at the end of the first half of the 20th century, he was named the greatest NFL player who ever played, greatest professional player. So that was a great one. But recent years have been marked with disasters, including 2019 when they took Dwayne Haskins at 15, and he said the league done messed up. The coaching staff didn't want him. And he was not the choice to make. They should not have drafted him that year. Robert Griffin III, 2012. There are some who say, "Oh, that was a great pick. He gave us a great year." Yeah, he did. But it all fell apart. And Mike Shanahan had said this. He said if Russell Wilson had been available in the 4th round, he would have taken him too. Wilson was not. They took Kirk Cousins, and we all know how that played out. You're probably familiar with the last two. Here are some of the others that he looked back on. Jason Campbell in 2005. That was a pick they made one spot after Aaron Rodgers. And you say, well, they didn't really have a chance to take Rodgers. Yeah, they did, because they had Carlos Rodgers, the corner from Auburn, his teammate, who they took at number 9. And he was a pretty good corner, but he couldn't catch. That was a real problem. He wound up playing San Francisco second half of his career, had a halfway decent career. They took Jason Campbell, though, moved back up into the 1st round to take him because Joe Gibbs was impressed that he could throw a fade, though he didn't play him right away. He had Mark Brunell. And Jason was a really good guy and a pretty good quarterback, but the move would have been at 9 to take Aaron Rodgers, and who knows how things would have been different. 2002, this is when Dan Snyder was the GM of the team. It was the first year of Steve Spurrier, and Spurrier looked at this and he said, I don't know why we need him. We got Danny Werfel and Shane Matthews. Got my former Gators. I'm good. But at least Snyder thought, well, let's try and get a guy who can play quarterback and has a pro arm, because those two guys did not. And they actually traded down a couple of times after failing to trade up, and thank goodness they didn't, though he's a heck of a nice guy, Joey Harrington, who was taken by the Detroit Lions. And they traded down, and they got Patrick Ramsey at number 5. That was not the quarterback to take. If they really needed a quarterback then, they should have taken David Garrard, who had a pretty good career with the Miami Dolphins and Jacksonville Jaguars. Heath Schuler, 1994. This was a time where you got Norv Turner coming in. He'd worked with Troy Aikman. Somehow he saw some of Aikman's qualities in Heath Schuler. He wasn't that. And they used the number 3 pick overall, which they had earned with a 4-12 record in Richie Pettibone's 1 year, and that didn't work out. Now, they could have taken Trent Dilfer, who did win a Super Bowl with the Ravens, but he was a mediocre quarterback as well. Kurt Warner was the choice, but he went undrafted, went to the Packers, then played in the Arena League, and the rest is history. Then you go on way back, and this is even before my time. Norm Snead, taken number 2 in 1961. Had they taken Fran Tarkington, who went with the 5th pick, Norm Snead was number 2. Tarkington went number 5 to the expansion Vikings. If they had taken him, does the Sonny era even happen? The Sonny is, in many ways, the most beloved player in the history of the franchise. They don't. If Tarkington proves to be all that, I don't think they trade him to the Eagles for Sonny. They might have. Snead was half decent, and they traded him to the Eagles for Sonny, and it turned out to be a great trade for Washington. Then going before that, Richie Lucas, who they took from Penn State in 1960, but he signed with the Buffalo Bills, never played in the NFL. They could have taken Don Meredith in that draft, but did not. The year before, they also drafted a quarterback, 4th overall, Don Allard. He didn't play for them, and he went to play in Canada. And this is a great quote that he dug up from George Preston Marshall. He said, "Allard's not so good that we're especially worried about losing him." Well, you drafted him 4th overall. That's how they judge their draft picks. He went to Canada. No big deal. He's not that good anyway. Well, why'd you take him number 4? Well, you probably took him number 4 because he was white. That was one thing with Marshall. But my God, that's funny. They should have taken Richie Pettibone, who was actually a quarterback coming out of Tulane, had a great career as a safety with the Bears, the Rams, and the Redskins. And then, you go way back to like Jack Scarbath in 1953 out of Maryland, Harry Gilmer, who was the number 1 pick overall out of Alabama in 1948, played 6 years, went 0-8 as a quarterback. He was not that good. They should have drafted Bobby Lane or Y.A. Tittle that year. And 1945, they took Jim Hardy. They traded him and 2 other players to the Rams for Oklahoma star Jack Jacobs. They probably should have held on to him. He was pretty decent, but the pick to take would have been Charlie Connerly, who was the 13th round pick, who later was he may have been the quarterback. Let's see, he may have been the quarterback when the Giants won the championship in 1956. I think he was. Charlie Connerly was, but you hope that Jaden Daniels is a trend breaker here. but has not gone well in the recent years where they picked, last 30 years where they picked quarterbacks in the first round. Heath Schuler, 94, Patrick Ramsey, 2002, Jason Campbell, 2005, RG3, 2012, and Dwayne Haskins in 2019. Orioles preview coming up next. We'll look at what happened last night and what's ahead as the team is now back in first place. It's the Andy Pollard Show, ESPN 630.